I've been quite positive about season 2 of House of the Dragon, which I think was a very strong season in a lot of ways. But as I discussed in my last video, the final episode was not a great season finale. It was a good episode, I still think that, but I've started to get a little worried about the show. Just reading comments from the writers and directors and whatnot, and I'm starting to understand better where George R. R. Martin might be coming from. He hasn't specifically said that he's talking about House of the Dragon when he's made some of his comments. But I've talked about this in previous videos. He has this quote from one of his recent blog posts, and I'll just read it real quick. Everywhere you look, there are more screenwriters and producers eager to take great stories and make them their own. It does not seem to matter whether the source material was written by Stan Lee, Charles Dickens, Ian Fleming, Roald Dahl, Ursula K. Le Guin, J.R.R. Tolkien, Mark Twain, Raymond Chandler, Jane Austen, or, well, anyone. He really wanted to say, or me, I think. No matter how major a writer is, no matter how great the book, there always seems to be someone on hand who thinks he can do better, eager to take the story and improve on it. The book is the book, the film is the film, they will tell you, as if they were saying something profound. Then they make the story their own. They never make it better, though. 999 times out of 1,000, they make it worse. He goes on to talk about Shogun and how he really likes that show and the changes they made. So how sometimes it works. And I've talked about how he, in season 1, talked about how Viserys was, he says, the character he created with Ryan and Sarah and Ty and the rest of our writers for the show is so much more powerful and tragic and fully fleshed than my own version in Fire and Blood that I'm half tempted to go back and rip up those chapters and rewrite the whole history of his reign. Paddy deserves an Emmy for this episode alone. If he doesn't get one, hey, there's no justice. So he talks about how there have been improvements in House of the Dragon to his own books. But that was back in season 1, and I haven't seen him, not only have I not seen him say anything like this about season 2, he doesn't say the rest of our writers or refer to the writing team or the team on this show as our. He doesn't have that possessive ever in any of his blog posts that I've seen. So it feels like there's less connection between Martin and this season. And so now I'm starting to read like the previous passage with this eye on like, there's something going on. He's also mentioned how he's not meeting with the writer's room when he's visiting England. And that's odd, right? So there's just all these little things. He also talks about where is this now? He talks a lot about dragons in one post and how they kind of messed up his dragons in Game of Thrones. And how they've done it again in House of the Dragon. And then he makes it pretty clear that he doesn't like Rhaena being replacing Nettles and how they're handling that. He says, you won't find dragons hunting the Riverlands or the Reach or the Vale or roaming the Northlands or the Mountains of Dorne. I mean, that's a pretty clear statement that, like, there should not be a dragon up in the Vale where Rhaena is now running off to meet it. Speaking of which, Rhaena just totally ditches her entire responsibility that Rhaenyra gave her to protect her sons and her dragon eggs and just runs off by herself. It's a sort of silly setup. Like, I was actually thinking, this could work. Like, combining characters isn't the end of the world. But I'm starting to see how, like, actually doing it in this way, like, it would make more sense if their caravan had been attacked or something and they'd been separated and then... but I see where Martin is coming from, and he says fantasy needs to be grounded. It is not simply a license to do anything you like. Smaug and Toothless may both be dragons, but they should never be confused. Ignore canon, and the world you've created comes apart like tissue paper. That's really interesting because I also found this old blog post of his back in like 2015 or something. And he was a lot less worried about how they were making changes to Game of Thrones, although some of those changes were pretty big. So he was writing back when, in the scene, when Sansa goes to Winterfell and is married off to Ramsay Snow, Ramsay Bolton. At the time, I hated that change because we don't know where Sansa is in the books. She's in the Vale, or not in the Vale at the Eyrie. In the end of Feast for Crows, and that's the last we hear about Sansa and that's been 19 years in our time. But in the show, they have her go to Winterfell and take that role on, and it's a totally different role. And he was much more chill about this than I was at the time. He wrote, "How many children did Scarlett O'Hara have? 3 in the novel, 1 in the movie, none in real life. She was a fictional character. She never existed. The show is the show, the books are the books. Two different tellings of the same story. Now, isn't that any interesting? Because in his previous quote that I just read, he talks about how screenwriters say the show is the show, the books are the books. And like how it's bad. But here he's saying it himself. The show is the show, the books are the books. Which is really interesting. Then he does note, the longer the show goes on, so he says, he talks about how like the butterfly effect. And he says, the longer the show goes on, the bigger the butterflies become. And now we have reached the point where the beat of butterfly wings is stirring up storms, like the one presently engulfing my email about Sansa and Ramsay. Now, that's interesting too, because we are seeing that in House of the Dragon with some of these changes. I was always a fan of them fleshing out the relationship between Rhaenyra and Alicent, because that's not really that big of a part of Fire and Blood, but they have to like give us more character than we get in that book, because the book is just a history, right? So we don't get a lot of character development in the book, and they needed to flesh these characters out so that we care about them, right? We care about Rhaenyra, we care about Alicent, we care about their children, we care about their fathers, and they do that really well. But then you start to see some of these quotes. So here's one from the director. Her name is Geeta Vasant Patel, and I keep forgetting how to say all those words. But Geeta Vasant Patel says, and this is a quote from TV Insider. Patel says that Rhaenyra and Alicent's dynamic is absolutely the love story at the center of House of the Dragon. Come with me, Alicent begged Rhaenyra in their last secret meeting. Rhaenyra admitted she wanted to go, but the call to duty was too great. And blah, blah, blah. So, absolutely the love story at the center of the House of the Dragon. Mm-hmm. Here's writer Sarah Hess, who says, there's so much in play. There are armies, there are dragons, there's castles and strongholds and political maneuvering. But at the end of the day, it comes down to these two women trying to figure it out. Bullshit. I'm sorry. That is not the story of the Dance of Dragons. That's not the story from Fire and Blood. I am totally fine with them fleshing out these characters and making them more a part of the story. But at this point in the story, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Fire and Blood, but not really a ton, no huge spoilers, but at this point in the story, Alicent is pretty much shoved aside. And, if you want to really make a show that examines the patriarchy, her being shoved aside and powerless and just like kind of in the wind is a great way to do it. You don't have her going and like, you don't need her to be a really influential character anymore, because she's not. She's the Queen Dowager. She's pretty much out. Unlike Cersei, she is not in control of anything at this point, right? Really, Aegon and Rhaenyra are the two people that should be having some sort of relationship at this point, which is not shown at all in the show. And that's fine. Maybe they're building to that, but that's really where the juicy stuff comes. This is not a show about two women trying to figure stuff out. And at this point, it's not a love story. They hate each other, and they should hate each other. I mean, think of what's happened. Alicent's child has killed Rhaenyra's. Rhaenyra's husband has ordered the assassination of Alicent's grandchild. They're killing each other's offspring at this point. And Rhaenyra wants to kill another of Alicent's kids. They should not be talking about flying away together, running away and living in a lesbian cottage down by the sea. It is not a love story between Alicent and Rhaenyra, and the only reason that it is at this point is because of the writers who are actively apparently shipping these characters or something. I understand fans trying to ship Alicent and Rhaenyra, but the people writing the show should have a little bit of fucking restraint. Like at this point, you should have a little bit of like narrative understanding. You should understand the story you're trying to adapt, and you should just adapt it. You flesh the bits out that need to be expanded upon, right? Give us those scenes. There's some great scenes. Kristen Cole and Gwaine, that's a great scene. They're making Cole a more sympathetic character, which is a really interesting twist. But they really need to focus on the story at hand, and they need to not. I mean, they need to not make it their own. To a degree, you're going to do that because you're making it a TV show, so it's going to be your own. It's inevitable. You can look at that statement, the show is the show, the books are the books, in a lot of different ways. And on just a fundamental level, they're going to be different because one is a book and one is a series, and they're not going to be the same. And in this book in particular, you have to make a lot of changes. But to change it in a way that's trying to make this the love story. I understand at the beginning of the show, the relationship between Rhaenyra and Alicent was really important. But we have crossed the Rubicon. That relationship is over. There should be no more Alicent Rhaenyra stuff at all. Like, give me a break. That you're forcing it. You're forcing it into a place where it doesn't belong in this story. So now I'm worried. Now, on the other hand, Ryan Condal, the showrunner, has said that season 3 is going to be all-out warfare. Now, I don't know that I trust that shit anymore because, like, this season should have been a lot more warfare. Let's be real. Like, you don't need 2 seasons of build-up, right? We don't need both seasons to end on the verge of war. There's just not enough going on in the story. Like, that would have worked if there was like a cool adventure or something, right? If there was something to draw us through that whole season. But this is just a lot of political maneuvering, which you just can't have that much of it. Like, we have to have some other things going on. And really, honestly, I think even smaller, like I've said this before, but even smaller skirmishes, just more, characters we care about getting into more, dire circumstances, that would help. But at this point, if season 3 is all out war and we get a whole bunch of, great battles and naval battles and dragon battles and all the rest, that could help make this more interesting. My concern is that the people in charge are saying things that make me think they actually don't know what they're doing, and that they're really actually, like so many other screenwriters and producers in Hollywood, they're actually making it their own and have lost sight of what this really is. I also think that connecting this so much to Game of Thrones through these visions and whatnot is also a mistake. I didn't mind having like a little bit of that with Viserys and Rhaenyra in the beginning, kind of giving them a little more connection to the Song of Ice and Fire and all that. That was fine. But to continue with it, to have that be Daemon's motivation to come back to Rhaenyra, I mean, honestly, did Daemon even need to go back to Rhaenyra? Why even go there? Why not just have Rhaenyra and Daemon not even connect and have that question mark? Will they be fighting with each other, for each other, alongside or against each other? That's more interesting. Anyways, that's all I have to say about that. I'm worried. I'm sure there's other things that the writers have said. I'm going to try to look for more to dig into. But right now, those are a couple statements that just really have me cringing at what this team is doing, and just wishing that we could have professionals adapting these shows, professionals who believe in the material they're adapting enough to give it a fair shot rather than making it their own. Or if they're going to expand upon it, doing it in a way like in season 1 with Viserys and making him such a compelling character, that's great. Give us characters we care about, absolutely, but twist and bend the fundamentals of the story to make it, to like ship these 2 women. What the fuck are you doing? What are you thinking? Anyways, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching. Peace. Where rulers